In a stunning display of courage, a white British TikTok influencer has revealed to the world that he identifies as Korean. Ollie London is his name. He's been getting plastic surgery for several years in an effort to, as a Newsweek article puts it, resemble their K-pop idol Jimin of BTS. I have only a vague idea what any of those words mean, but the upshot is that now London, who also identifies as non-binary, has completed his surgical transition and is ready to fully live his life as the gender-fluid Korean that he's always been deep down. For too long, he has had a Korean trapped inside his body, and now, with $150,000 of assistance from cosmetic surgeons, his true East Asian self has emerged like a bruised and swollen butterfly from a fleshy cocoon. In a video recorded just after his latest procedure, Ollie explains that his surgically adjusted eyes and nose and other features now confirm him as a tried and true Korean. And I think the case that he makes is pretty bulletproof. Let's listen.
안녕하세요. 저는 지민입니다. Hey guys, I'm finally Korean. I've transitioned. I'm so happy I've completed my look. I'm finally Korean, guys. I have the eyes. Just had a brow lift as well. So I'm so happy. Finally, I've been trapped in the wrong body for 8 years. And that's the worst feeling in the world, when you're trapped and you don't feel like you can be yourself. But finally, I'm Korean. I can be myself. And I'm so happy.
I mean, he looks happy. Finally, he is Korean. It's as simple as that. Bigots might voice disagreement, insisting that one must actually be from Korea, or at least have Korean citizenship, in order to be considered in any sense Korean. They might even argue that surgically narrowing your eyes to resemble Asian facial features not only fails to make you Asian, but is also highly insulting and degrading to the real Asians, of which you are not one. But Ollie deftly countered these arguments in a series of tweets disarming and debunking such discriminatory talking points. He wrote, quote, "Being transsexual is the same as being transracial because you're born in the wrong body." In other tweets, he announced that, quote, "trans rights are human rights," and that, quote, "there are millions of underrepresented transracial people in the world, and I want to elevate their voices and help them live their truth and be themselves." Now, these may be more assertions than arguments, more spitting slogans than making a case, but if that's been sufficient for transgender advocates, then why shouldn't it work for a transracial pioneer? Driving the point home, Ollie, I think, really vanquished his critics once and for all by dropping the ultimate progressive trump card in a different video. Listen.
This is my reason for showing the flag, and I do identify as Korean. This is my choice. This is my decision. It's not hurting anyone.
There you go. His decision, his choice, not hurting anyone. That's really it, right? In the age of psychological man, when all that matters is an individual's mental states and all that you must do to justify an action is claim that the action makes you feel good and causes no direct physical harm to anyone else, whether or not the latter is actually true, the validity of a white man's transformation in that context into a genderless Korean cannot be denied. Certainly, if you accept trans ideology, then you have absolutely no logical basis for denying Ollie's truth. A truth which is grounded in the exact same premise. A truth which must indeed be true if the premise is true. And the premise, to remind you, is that a person's physical, biological identity is totally determined by how they feel about themselves. A man who feels like a woman is not merely a feminine man, but is actually a literal woman. All of the physical barriers which have for millennia served to separate men from women are dissolved and discarded. Biology is subordinated to the emotional whims of the individual. Why should Ollie's emotional whims not be afforded the same supernatural weight? His case, based on the logic of progressivism, is airtight. Based on the logic of, well, logic, it's not at all, but based on the logic of progressivism, it is. And yet the left has not accepted him. Comments on the internet about his racial transition have been overwhelmingly negative. The Daily Wire documents a few of them. Reading now, it says, "I'm sorry, but you can't just choose to be Korean. It's a nationality and ethnicity," tweeted one trans-identifying account. "You have to be born Korean. Just because you like the culture doesn't mean you can take it and become it. There is a way to appreciate a different culture. This is not it." Quote, "As a Korean non-binary person, I haven't really talked about the Ollie London thing, but the fact that they're acting like it's genuine, that it's part of a journey due to an identity issue really irks me. It's a mockery of trans people. It's cultural appropriation, posted another person. Finally, one Korean user replied that while he celebrated London's new gender identity, it's wrong for him to claim a new ethnic identity. Korean isn't a pronoun, nor is it a persona you decide to suddenly take on because of K-pop hype. I'm glad you identify as non-binary, and I applaud you for being transparent about that, but I can't commend you for taking a whole ethnicity and treating it like a persona. Taking a whole ethnicity and treating it like a persona. Almost like when someone takes a biological sex and treats it like, I don't know. An article in the left-wing Paper Mag, written by Sandra Song, editor-at-large and a fellow Korean, is just one long transphobic harangue against the entire transracial community. Song writes, quote, "As someone who actually has Korean DNA, though, I can say that some white fetishist, as proven by those 15 surgeries to look like Jimin, suddenly deeming themselves Korean is incredibly offensive, especially since it effectively trivializes our identities because they're suddenly trendy. Apparently, though, that doesn't really register for Ali, who's continually been a notable example of Western fetishization that's objectified us based on South Korea's recent contributions to global culture. So yeah, obviously it's pretty sus that a white person is saying they're Korean." Now, leaving aside the embarrassing fact that the magazine's editor-at-large wrote and published the words "so yeah" and "pretty sus," the real problem is that she would accuse a person of fetishizing and trivializing her identity simply because he is cartoonishly mimicking her appearance and claiming that his degraded mockery is as authentic as her own identity. I mean, she's essentially arguing that his imitation is an imitation and thus cannot be as valid or real as the thing he is imitating. And her points make a lot of sense, come to think of it, but unfortunately, she, like nearly everyone else in her ideological camp, has already thrown open the doors and invited men to fetishize and trivialize and mimic her identity. It's just that she wishes the mimicry would stay contained to her sex, not her ethnicity. The problem, though, is that sex is far more objective and far less fluid than ethnicity. If the former can be erased, then so can the latter. Ali London knows that, and now he's entitled to be seen as fully Korean, just as Korean as any other Korean. Indeed, he may be even more Korean than cis Koreans like Sandra Song. I mean, you could make that argument. This at least was a choice that he has made bravely. If cis Koreans don't want to tolerate or accept trans Koreans, that's their problem and their bigotry they have to work through. It'd be better for them to just remain silent in the meantime while the march of progress continues and all objective markers of identity are erased and human existence is reduced to a murky puddle of ambiguity. That is the world the left wanted, and now they have it. Congratulations. And that is why the bigots who would deny the validity of Ali London's Korean identity are today absolutely, and with great righteous rage, canceled. Listen, hit that subscribe button right now. Do it right now. I thank you for your compliance. It is somewhat appreciated.